Almost everyone knows the Gospel story, which describes in detail the events of the last days of the life of Jesus Christ. On Thursday evening, before the day of execution, Jesus and his 12 apostles have their last meal, known as the Last Supper. After the meal, Christ and the apostles go to the Mount of Olives and come to the Garden of Gethsemane. There Jesus retires to prayer, taking with him Peter and both sons of Zebedee, James and John, as reported by the evangelists Mark and Matthew. Soon Judas Iscariot comes there with a multitude of armed soldiers sent by the chief priests, scribes and elders. They arrest Jesus, after which he is tried and crucified. The evangelists report the presence of the 12 male apostles at the Last Supper, but in many old paintings of the Last Supper, a young woman sits next to Jesus. Artists often depict her resting her head on the shoulder or chest of the Savior. Sometimes she sits on his lap, and Christ embraces her with his arm. There are dozens of such paintings. The Gospels say nothing about the presence of women at the Last Supper. When Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane before his arrest, according to Mark and Matthew, the apostles Peter, James and John were with him. But in several ancient paintings that have survived to this day, among the 3 apostles of Christ, whom he took with him to perform the Gethsemane prayer, there is again a young woman. She is also depicted in a few paintings of the arrest of Jesus, where she is also arrested, like Christ.
A study of ancient paintings, miniatures and frescoes depicting the crucifixion of Jesus allows us to suggest that among the two robbers crucified together with Christ, there is again a young woman. The following facts can be noted. Often one of the crucified does not have a beard and mustache. He has long hair, signs of a female figure, and even larger areas of nipples. Sometimes one of the crucified is depicted from behind, with his head thrown back or with his face covered by long hair. Probably, in this way, medieval artists tried to hide his female breasts and face. In Orthodox icons and manuscripts, the wise thief is often depicted as a young man without a beard or mustache, looking lovingly at Christ, and sometimes his head was decorated with a halo. On iconographic originals and miniatures, the name Barbara, or its abbreviated forms, Vara and Varak, is written above the images of the wise thief. Barbara, Varvara, or Vara, crucified with Christ, may be a woman whose name was Varvara, and its abbreviated form is Varia.
Another little-known fact in the history of Jesus is his execution by decision of Queen Helena, who ruled over Israel, as described in the medieval Jewish treatise Toledat Yeshu, or the History of Jesus. It says that the wise men of Israel, seeing how many believed in Jesus, told their queen that he was a sorcerer and a magician, calling himself the Messiah and drawing many people to him who might turn away from the queen. They asked Helen to execute Jesus, and on her orders, Jesus was seized and brought to trial, where the queen announced to the wise men that she was handing him over to them. They took Christ to the synagogue in Tiberias, chained him, and tied him to a column, where they placed a crown of thorns on his head, where they gave Jesus vinegar to drink and beat him. Christ's supporters were able to free their teacher and take him to Antioch. But later Jesus was arrested again and executed. When Christ's body disappeared from the tomb, Queen Helen demanded that the wise men find it under pain of death, and they found it in the garden of Judas Iscariot. The body of Jesus was found, tied by the feet with a rope and dragged through the streets of Jerusalem to the queen. Seeing his body and smiling, Helen praised the wise men and said that this was the one who was going to ascend to heaven. This story was also not reflected in the Gospels. They only mention a high priest with a female name Anna, who participated in deciding the fate of Jesus. In the few paintings of the crucifixion, a woman is also depicted in the group of those executing Christ, who may be the Queen of Israel. Helen, In the miniature from the book The Garden of Delights by Moroder of Landsberg, the Queen is depicted under the crucifixion, like the whore of Babylon, sitting on the beast and collecting blood from the wound of Christ in a cup. Why did the Gospels say nothing about the friend or wife of Jesus, who accompanied him in the last hours of his life, and probably shared his bitter fate with him? Why did the Gospels and other historical documents not preserve information about Queen Helena, who gave the order for the execution of Christ?